If you think about several years ago during a President Kuchma regime, where President Kuchma had emphasized this non-vector foreign policy, a Ukraine that neither goes westward nor a Ukraine that goes, quote-unquote, eastward. This I see as being problematic with the new Ukrainian president or the new obstacles in Ukraine vis-a-vis the pressure and the influence that is done upon Ukraine by Russia. All three of my predecessors had mentioned the Black Sea Fleet and the possibility of continuing the lease of the Black Sea Fleet, which I think obviously would be a mistake for Ukraine in terms of fulfilling its true destiny of being a sovereign and independent nation. Instances such as the recognition of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Interestingly enough, in 2008 during the invasion, Viktor Yanukovych had come out and did say that he would be in support of recognizing those two breakaway republics from the country of Georgia. The energy sector. The energy sector obviously is something that cannot be resolved today, tomorrow, or even in a week's time. This is something that needs interlocutors not just from Ukraine, but also from the European Union, from our European allies. If we're trying to make foreign policy right, or a correct foreign policy for Ukraine, a correct foreign policy for Ukraine also involves the energy sector. Unfortunately, given some of our European allies that are also our allies in NATO, are bypassing some of the things that we, even as the United States, would like to see in terms of transparency when it comes to the energy sector. How is it that these particular deals are being made for one particular European country as compared for the alliance or the continent as a whole? This obviously affects Ukraine. And having Ukraine and the instability of its foreign factors and the influence, undue pressure, makes it that much more difficult for any type of domestic agenda to be done in Ukraine. I am not here in advocating that Ukraine by no means whatsoever is a perfect world, because it is not. The Ukrainians themselves have to roll up their sleeves, and by rolling up their sleeves, they have a job to do as well. Interaction and engagement with the West, in particular with the EU and specifically with Washington, is exactly where this country should be headed if they want a sound economic policy, if they want true democratic principles to maintain after 18 years of independence, or specifically that have grown since President Yushchenko's term, since 2005. Looking at the possibility of NATO membership for Ukraine, I still have high hopes for this. Maybe, as my mother says, I'm idealistic, but ideas make policy eventually, or sometime, we hope. But even thinking about what happened in Bucharest in April of 2008, where a membership action plan was not necessarily signed for Ukraine, where the Russians obviously are very opposed to having a membership action plan for Ukraine. We have turned that around now and renamed it as an annual national program. And it seems to be that the annual national program has, quote-unquote, satisfied to some degree, or appeased to some degree, the Russian government, because it doesn't have that stigma of membership action plan, i.e. eventual membership into the alliance. Yet at the same time, the criteria for a membership action plan, i.e. now, the annual national program, are exactly what is necessary in Ukraine. These criteria to be a member of NATO is democratic institutions, a free market economy, liberalization of visa regimes, civilian control of your military, and so forth and so on. These are all pragmatic and beneficial issues that the Ukrainians can address and obviously can work towards. So given that all of my predecessors have spoken about what is necessary to do right now, I think for us, even as a Ukrainian American community, is true engagement. We have to engage our members of Congress, and we have to engage the administration for them to engage and to make, quote-unquote, engagement with Ukraine sexy. President Obama has mentioned this several times, to make an issue sexy. Well, how do you make engagement with Ukraine sexy? There has to be something there. Unfortunately, if you've been reading the press, President Obama will not be attending the EU summit coming up in later this year in Spain, and it seems to have put a little bit of divisiveness between the EU and the United States. This right now is something that Ukraine cannot even afford, since the EU and the United States should be working together to try to bring the country of Ukraine and all of its reforms necessary closer into the West. Ukraine, if you want to say, for the past 18 years, has made its name out there in the world. It did in 1991 as the third largest nuclear power in the world. It did, obviously, in 2004 with the Orange Revolution. And that revolution was made as an example by President Bush about other revolutions that had happened since then. This is the time right now for us to engage Ukraine, to make it sexy to engage Ukraine, because a non-vector policy in Ukraine right now, neither West nor East, is going to be detrimental not just for the United States, not just for the region, obviously for Europe as a whole. Thank you.